Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Wayne's Guitar and Tube Amp World. This morning we got an interesting project which we're going to have to get done in a hurry. It's an Epiphone ES295, which belongs to a friend of mine, Mick Delavey, who's a professional musician. Mick plays with the current lineup of Bachman Turner, and he's also a studio musician and a freelance musician. And by the way, Mick is going to be launching a podcast sometime mid-summer, June, July, so look forward for that. So the problem that Mick's got with this guitar is that the bridge moves and it won't intonate properly. So we're going to pin the bridge, and also we're going to do some work on the Bigsby so that it works a little bit better. But it's a beautiful guitar and very versatile. It's got P90s on it, and Epiphone does an amazing job of some of these recreations of some of the classic Gibson designs. So I'm going to get going on it here, and we'll see how good we can make this thing play. So the first thing that I'm going to do is obviously disassemble the guitar, take the old strings off, and what I do with the guitar that's got a Bigsby, I use a little block of wood. This is 3/4 of an inch by 1.5, and I put it here on the back and then swing the arm around. And this keeps the arm on the Bigsby from scratching the back of the guitar, and it also sometimes will loosen the tension a wee bit on the strings so that it's easier to take them off and put them back on again. It keeps the little posts on the roller at sort of a right angle so that I can get at them easily. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I bought myself something I should have bought years ago. It's an Ernie Ball Power Peg Pro, and works very well. You might see that I've actually put L for loosen and T for tighten on it so that I don't get confused. I have broken a few strings with it, so this helps me a little bit. So let's go ahead and remove all the strings. Now these strings had it, so it's no point in saving them and reusing them, but I am going to save them because I might use them later on for polishing up the nut. So let's be very careful and take them out without scratching up the guitar. And what we'll do is we'll lay them over there for the meantime. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is remove the pick guard so we have access to everything. So I'm going to use a little screwdriver, and I don't like using power drivers on guitars for two reasons. One is that if they slip, you can do a lot of damage to the guitar surface very quickly. And the other one is that on a lot of guitars, especially the cheaper import ones, the quality of the steel they use for the screws is very poor, and you can actually strip the heads of the screws or break the screws off in the guitar itself. And once you do that, you got a real problem. So I'm going to take these off. And we'll just place this over here, clean that up later on. And I always keep little yogurt containers or tuna fish cans, and I put my bits and pieces in it. And that way you don't lose it. We'll take the bridge off, and we're going to start cleaning everything up. And this is for two reasons. One is it's COVID time, so good soap and water sterilizes the guitar so that you can't get your COVID off of it, and also I can't give it to somebody else. And the other reason is we're going to polish up the guitar, and I always like to use a good quality polish that does not contain silicone, and I use things like Martin acoustic guitar polish or Gibson polish, which has been around forever and is pretty much just a diluted version of carnauba wax. The reason I don't like silicone is that I've had to work on several guitars that people have used silicone-based guitar polishes on. They look great when you put them on because they seem to cover all the scratches and stuff, but as they get older, they get real gummy, and it's very hard to get them off if you ever have to do a repair on the finish or anything like that. So again, just when you're using your guitar polishes, make sure that there's no silicone in them. Now I may be going to demonstrate for you just the technique that I use for using a screwdriver so that I don't mar a finish. And what I do is I grab it usually by the shank, and then my hand up here, and what I do is I hold it like this so there's absolutely no way that that can slip off. So we're removing our truss rod plate at this point because we know we're going to have to adjust the truss rod. And again, I'm putting it in a little container so that, along with the screws, so that I know where it is. And there's our truss rod plate. And we'll clean up the headstock a little bit more. Also, in cleaning up the headstock or the fingerboard, I noticed two things. One was that the frets are fairly worn on this guitar, so at some point it's more than likely going to need a fret dress, but I don't think we're going to do that today. And the other thing is that I noticed that lemon oil or something similar has been used on the fingerboard, and more likely it was quite a while ago, but it's still kind of gunky, and it's one of the reasons that I don't really like using lemon oil or any kind of oil on, is that it often stays tacky and it collects a lot of dirt. This fingerboard is not as clean as what I'd like to see it, but I managed to clean it up fairly well. Now you can see that we have an issue with the machine heads here, that actually the screws holding them in are so loose that I can turn them with the fingers. So the first thing that I want to do here is I want to tighten these up. And what I need is a 10 millimeter nut driver wrench like this, and I get this one, I think came from Canadian Tire here in Canada, or you can get them from Harbor Freight, which is another one of my favorites. But just simply put it on, and most of the offshore and even the fender machine heads are pretty much all 10 millimeters. So what I like to do is I like to snug them up so that they're nice and snug, but do not mar the finish of the headstock or bulge the, usually this is a plastic veneer that's over here, bulge it. So I just tighten them up, finger tightness, and you also don't want to tighten them up too much so you crack the headstock. So we'll do it one more time again, just get them nice and snug. Okay, they're nice and snug. Now these machine heads seem to be fairly good. I'm just trying them and they feel to be fairly smooth, and there's no bits and pieces of milling material in there, so these should work quite well. A lot of people like to immediately change the machine heads on a guitar. I don't do that. A lot of people think that their tuning problems come from the machine heads, and unless the machine heads are very, very poor and very, very loose, it's usually the nut or the bridge or the way in which they wrap their strings around the headstock. Once we have the front nuts on the machine heads tightened up, the next thing I like to do is flip the guitar over and snug up the little screws that hold the machine heads into the back of the headstock. And again, you don't want to reef on them too much, because a lot of the screws that are now made, and especially offshore, are very, very soft, and you'll either strip the heads out on them, or the other worst thing is if you break them in the headstock, then you have to remove them, and that gets to be pretty messy. So we've now got this all nice and snugged up, so we've got kind of got the headstock done. Let's flip the guitar back over again, and we're going to do a little bit of, I guess, what I might call preventative maintenance. And one of the things that I like to do is I like to use a countersink on a lot of the holes that are on the guitar. And the reason for it is that often when you unscrew or screw back in the screws, you actually chip the finish around the screw hole. And I don't know if you can see that, but you can see this chipped out a little bit. So very simple process. What I do is take an electric drill and use a small countersink on it, and just simply countersink a hole in the bit. And that way, when you take the screws in and out, you're not going to remove more of the finish. Now we've got our countersinking done, and one of the things that I've noticed is that the nut holding the selector switch, pickup selector switch, is loose. So I've got a specialized tool which I bought years and years ago from Stu Mack, and I'm not sure whether you can get them any other place, but this is the tool here. It's a nut tightener and loosener, and simply the way that it works is you open up the jaws by rotating that, and then you close them by tightening them up like this, and you can see the jaws are starting to tighten. So first of all, what we do is make sure that we've got enough clearance. If not, we have to take off the switch button and just open them up, the jaws, until they fit, and then screw them back down again. And you can tighten that up a wee bit. Now we want to make sure that our switch is actually aligned so that it goes pretty much up and down. It doesn't go side to side. Okay, so the next job that we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting some finish on the fingerboard, and what I like to use is I use a product that's made by Verithane, and it's called finishing wax, classic paste finishing wax. And you can get this at Home Depot, that's where I got it, or at Lowe's. I'm sure any paint store that handles furniture finishing materials will have them. But the reason that I like to use it is that it does not get sticky like lemon oil or any of the other oil treatments. You can actually put it on any surface. You can put it on a maple fingerboard as well as a rosewood fingerboard. And every time you change strings, it's a very simple process to put a little bit more on. There's some other benefits to it. Wax is slightly antiseptic. So when you put it on, it has a tendency of killing any germs that come from your fingers and get deposited in the fingerboards. Fingerboard of a guitar is extremely dirty. Another benefit of it is that if you've noticed on this guitar, the frets are really quite, they're corroded, and they're full of finger oil. And what this will do is it'll actually remove some of that corrosion, clean up some of the oil that's on it, and it'll make the frets and the fingerboard quite nice and easy to play. So I'm going to go ahead, and the first thing I do is just get some on my rag and make sure you get everything, and go right over the frets. I don't know if you can see, but you can see that this is cleaning up the frets. It's dissolving that old oil that was on here, taking all the stickiness off. Now, as I said, these frets are a little bit worn, but I have to have this guitar done late this afternoon for Mick because he's using it in a recording session, so I don't have time to do a fret dress. Some other point we may have some more time with it. In some future videos, I'm going to actually show you how to do a proper fret dress and repolishing. It's not all that hard to do, but it does take a lot of time. So usually what I'll do is I'll put on one coat of the wax and rub it down quite good. Make sure that it's all over the fingerboard, around the frets, and you'll see that as you're doing that, that a lot of gunk will come off the fingerboard. So we'll do it again. And we'll just let that dry for a bit. We've got a few other things we can do while we're waiting for that. So we'll just leave that there. And the next step is going to actually be taking the excess off and buffing up the fingerboard. But we've got a few things that we can do before then. We're going to have to figure out what the bridge position is. So the best way to do it is to measure from the nut to the 12th fret. And this one is 12 and 5/8. So anyhow, what we're going to do is we're going to measure out. We know that this should be somewhere between a 24 and or 24 and a half and 25 inches. So we're going to measure approximately where it is, have a look, and then the next step is to actually put masking tape down so we can put our bridge onto it once we then get our strings on and then intonate the guitar. Now, I like to use a fairly good masking tape for a couple of reasons. One is that it usually will not remove the finish of a guitar because it sticks well, but not well enough to actually pull the finish off the guitar, and you can actually do that. So let's and what I use is I'm using 3M, and I'm using the blue stuff. There's usually sort of the light colored or the brown colored, which is the cheapest. I don't use that. Second is the green, which is okay, and then I use the blue. So what we want to do is we know approximately where that bridge should be, so we're going to put some masking tape on here so that we can move our bridge around. And that way it won't scratch the top of the guitar, and also we can then mark around the bridge where we're going to be putting it. So there we got that on. Okay, we've let the wax on the fingerboard dry for about 5-10 minutes. Next thing we're going to do is just do a buff out on it. So you get yourself another rag, clean one, and then just go back and forth and try to get as much of that wax and as much of that old gunk off as what you can. And if you look at the bottom of your rag, you'll see that there's usually the old stuff coming, the old dirt coming off, and then I just take my fingernail, put it in the rag, and run along the side of each fret to get any remaining stuff out of there. Okay, we've taken the excess wax and going to keep polishing this up, and you can see that the frets are getting cleaner already and the fingerboard's getting glossy. And like I say, I like to do this every time I change strings. It's very simple to do, and you can play the guitar right away because it's not like any of the oils where you put them on and you've got to let them dry before you can actually play them. So that looks pretty good. We're going to maybe polish these up just a little bit more, but they're way better than what they were. Now you can see the fingerboard looks a lot cleaner than what it was, and it's also getting to be a little bit shiny, which is nice. It'll make it feel slick when you play it. Also, if you get a little wax from the fingerboard onto your strings, it has a tendency of making them not corrode so fast, especially if you've got a lot of acid in your fingers. Okay, so we'll maybe do a little more polishing on these. They're actually looking pretty good. Surprisingly good, consider that there weren't. Now the next step that I'm going to do is I've got the bridge off of this guitar, and in many cases the bridges are fairly corroded, or they've got a lot of dirt and grime in them. So what I use is I like a product called Simple Green, and I take the bridge part off, so that's that part, and we're going to put a little bit of Simple Green on there and use a toothbrush, clean it up, let it dry. By the way, I'm not endorsed by any products, so any products that you see I talk about here, or any suppliers, simply ones that I like. There's other alternatives, but now we're ready to do the bridge. Now we're about to wash the bridge, so I've got the bridge taken off the base plate, which I don't want to wash because it's made out of rosewood. So this is the product that I kind of like, called Simple Green, and again, I'm not paid by them, but it's something I've been using for years. I find it cuts the grease and doesn't corrode the finish. And just take a toothbrush and get in there and get all the sweat and dirt out. And you'll notice that I'm using a screen in the bottom of my sink. This has saved me a lot of aggravation. You can get it at the dollar store, because occasionally you'll find that bits and pieces will drop out as you're cleaning them. They've been held in by the corrosion or by the gunk that are on them. And when you wash them, screw or something might come out and down the drain it goes, and then you got a problem. But if you got this little catch screen in there, then you don't have a problem. So rinse that off really well and shake it out a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put it on a cloth and let it sit there for a little bit, maybe whack it a few times. There we go, get some of the water out. So there, our bridge, once it dries, is ready to go back on the guitar. Next step that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to polish up the frets a little bit more, and all I'm using is just a standard eraser. Half of it's pink and the other half is kind of a blue color, and very cheap. Get them in any stationery store. This one's been well used, but all you do is go back and forth on the fret like this, and it'll remove any of the remaining corrosion. So it's starting to look even better than it did before. And I don't know if you can see that, but it's removing the remainder of the corrosion and old fingerboard oil off the fret, and it's making it nice and shiny. Now the fretting on this guitar has been fairly well done. There really isn't any sharp edges, or there's no fret sprout beyond the edges of this fret, so it's quite good. That's coming along really nice. Okay, I've gone over all the frets with our eraser, and you can see how much corrosion and gunk that this eraser has removed. So the frets are quite nice and shiny. So what'll usually happen is you'll scuff up your wax on your fingerboard a little bit, so I'm just going to give it one more coat, and it'll do two things. It'll get it back nice and lustre, and the other thing is that it'll remove any further debris or gunk that's on this fingerboard. So we'll just give it a nice quick coat, and we're going to let it dry a little bit, and then we'll buff it out again. But these frets are looking surprisingly good. Now what I'd like to do is also put some wax on this base for the bridge. It's made out of rosewood, and it's quite clean, so I don't have to clean it or do anything with it. And by the way, you can't use simple green and water on this. It'll make it go dull and can warp it and stuff. But we're going to put a little bit of the carnauba wax on it, and it'll do a couple things. It'll clean it up a little bit. It'll protect the finish also, and it'll stop it from cracking. It's quite common for these over the years to dry out and crack. So again, every time you change your strings, it's a pretty simple process just to take some of the wax that I showed you and put on here, buff it up, and it'll keep your bass to your bridge in good condition for a lot of years. So we'll just put it on, and if you get a little bit on the screws themselves, that'll keep them from corroding, and it'll also make the nuts go on a lot easier. I'm not going to do the underside because it'll just be a little too slippery, although we're going to pin this bridge down, so we're just going to let this dry a little bit. There we go, and this cleans everything off real nice. Also, you can see that these are the adjustment pieces that go on the bridge. I've cleaned those already, just damp rag and a little bit of simple green. If I want to get picky, I can put a little bit of wax on them to keep them from corroding. You can see there's a little bit of corrosion on these already. Okay. And I'm going to polish out the neck just a wee little bit again. Remove the excess of wax off of it. Oh, looking real good. See, these go on nice and smooth now. Easier to adjust. So there's our bridge ready to go. So we've now got our bridge back on our bottom plate, and you can see that it's nice and shiny. It's all cleaned up. It's got a little bit of wax on it, which is good because it'll save it from corroding. So there we are. Now the next thing I like to do is, this is an ABR1 bridge copy of the old Gibson bridge. It's offshore, but it's actually quite good quality. So the way that these originally were put on was they actually put the adjustment screws towards the pickup, and in some cases that's okay, but in other cases you might want to turn it around because it might be easier to get at. So if you turn it with this towards the back pickup, if the pickup isn't too high or you can adjust it down, then you can get in to adjust your intonation screws. If it isn't, then you can turn it around this way, and you can usually get in it from the back, from, in this case, the Bigsby end. So what I'm going to do is, it looks like this one originally from the factory was oriented so that the adjustment screws are towards the pickups. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of in general set this bridge as to kind of where I think it should be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the saddle that goes underneath the low E string, the bass string, and I'm going to put it pretty much all the way back. And the next one, which would be the A string, I'm going to adjust it back, but not quite as much. And then the D string, I'm going to adjust it just a little bit, not quite so far back. The G string, I'm going to pretty much put right to the back of the bridge. And the B string goes a little bit forward of where the G is, and then the E string goes a little bit forward of the B string. So this is just a rough and dirty so that we can kind of get our intonations sort of happening. Now you'll notice that these saddle adjustment screws, these guys here, are a little bit loose, and with especially an ABR1 type bridge, you can see that it's held on by this piece of wire. Sometimes these rattle, and if this one's going to rattle, then I'll show you some tricks as to how you can take the rattle out of it. But what we're going to do now is we're going to place the bridge back on the guitar, and again with this one I'm going to put the saddles forward where it actually was, and it looks like we've got enough clearance between the pickup and the adjustment screws to be able to actually set our intonation. Now I'm going to set it on top of the masking tape, and the next step is going to be actually putting some strings on this guitar. But before I do that, something that I want to do is, I notice that the pole pieces on the pickups on the P90s are starting to rust a wee bit. So what I like to use is I use a mineral oil that's made for sewing machines, and it really doesn't have any additives in it that would destroy plastic, because a lot of times on sewing machines, there's a lot of plastic parts, and they don't want those plastic parts to disintegrate. So I wouldn't use other kinds of oil, like I'm not sure I'd use WD-40, because First of all, it's conductive, and we just don't know what that'll do inside the pickup. If we've got some areas where the insulation is thin or broken on the wires. And I wouldn't use WD-4 or I wouldn't use 3-in-1 oil, because that's meant for electric motors and it's got some additives in it. I'm sure there's some graphite in it, and again, it's conductive. So the next step I'm going to do is just put a wee bit of sewing machine oil on those pull pieces, and then I'm going to adjust them out a little bit. So I've got a little bit of sewing machine oil in this little bottle, because they usually come in 1 liter 1 liter bottles, or sometimes you can get them in smaller squeeze cans. But again, you can get it, should be able to get it at any sewing machine center. So what I do is put a little bit on the Q-tip and then just put a little bit on each pull piece, and this will kind of clean the pull piece up, and it'll also prevent any further rusting. If you get rusting on the pull pieces, it forms iron oxide, and it often can flake off and then it goes all over the place. But we want to keep these pull pieces in nice shape. You can see that they're actually cleaning up a little bit too. If you're real picky, you can actually take these right out and clean them up. So now we've got these done up, and I see our screws here are corroding a little bit that hold our pickups, so let's put a little bit on those. Now don't worry if you got a little bit of excess, because we're just going to wipe that off. And again, I said this will not mar the plastic. So let that soak in for a little bit. And I'll give these screws are pretty bad shape. I might replace those. I've got some new ones, but we'll see. I can see that one of these, so actually two or three of these screws have already had the heads gnarled up. There were Phillips, and somebody has tightened them. First of all, I can see down too much because there's a warping of the pickup cover, and also it's stripped the head of the screw. So thank God they're not broken. Okay, so let's now just take a paper towel or a piece of toilet paper, Kleenex, whatever you want, and wipe the excess off. Okay, now that'll give just a nice little coat of oil on the pull pieces, so there'll be no further rusting of them. Sometimes they're really, really bad, and I have to take them out, and I use things like Autosol, which you can get at any automotive shop, supply shop. Here we use Lordco. You can get it at O'Reilly's. You can get it at Schuck's. It comes in a tube, and I use that along with a toothbrush and a rag. But you got to make sure you take them out before you do it. And once you're finished with them, you clean them up real nice, put a little bit of oil on and put them back in again. Now the next job that I'm going to do is, I don't like where these pull pieces are sitting, so I'm going to adjust the pull pieces, and I'm not sure how well you can see where the pull pieces are, but usually what I like is on the back, I like to have the head of the pull piece be, the bottom of it pretty much be even with the top of the pickup cover. And on the front one, I don't like it that high, but I like it where the slot that's cut in the pull piece is actually, the bottom of the slot is equal with even with the top of the pickup cover. So next step we're going to do is adjust these. Okay, I've now got my strings on, and I've got them sort of up to tension, but not into tune. But next thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that my bridge is located at approximately 24.75. And I want to make sure that the strings actually go over the pole pieces of the guitar. So what you can do is move your pole piece or your bridge back and forth a little bit until you can center the pole pieces. Now on this one, the back is a little bit narrow because it's an original P90 design, which aren't staggered for the different positions. And so I'm going to make sure that my high E and my low E are at the same position over their respective pole pieces. And then I'm going to have a look at the front and see how close it is, which it's not too bad. Sometimes you'll find that when you line it up to the back that the front is off a little bit, and this one's fairly good. So I'm fairly happy with it so far. Now, where I've adjusted the bridge, I've got more than likely 1/4 of an inch between both pickups, so I don't know if you can see that very good, but this is just a starting position, and we'll have to see how this works. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to tune up the guitar, and you can see that I'm fairly good over the pole pieces. Now, sometimes you'll find that when you line up the back when the front one's off and vice versa, I usually like to make sure that it's the back one that's aligned. Now the next thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to be tuning up the guitar, and in order to do that I'm going to remove my little block, which basically doesn't have very much tension on it at this point, and I'm going to put on a tuner. And this particular one is Diodario, which I've used a lot of Starks, and they're really good, but the Diodario, I'm trying to see if it's got a longer battery life. I've checked both of them in terms of accuracy, and they're pretty much the same. So my only criticism of the Stark 1 is that it eats batteries pretty quickly. This one seems to be a little bit better, but I'll let you know what happens. So I'm going to tune this up and be back in a second. Now I've got the guitar tuned up to pitch, and with the Bixby, a bit of a procedure that I use is I actually bring it up about a half step, so the bass E is usually I don't know, about E sharp, and relatively just bring them up sharp. And you'll find as you go down that because of the Bigsby settling in, they'll actually go down closer to pitch. And then before I get real serious about it, I just work on the Bigsby a wee bit and make sure that everything loosened up, so work it back and forth a little bit. One of the things that I forgot to mention was that when we line up our pole pieces over our strings over our pole pieces, we also want to make sure that the strings are relatively even over the neck. So you want the high E to be about the same distance from the edge of the fingerboard as what you want the low E or the bass E to be. Now you can see here we're a little bit off, so I've got a choice I can make. If it was the string, especially the lower E, was falling off the fingerboard, then I would try to bring it up a little bit. But I'm going to bring it shifted a little bit on me over the pole pieces, so I'm going to bring it back just a wee bit, and I think it'll get a little bit better. So let's try shifting this up a little bit. And you can see as I move it, the strings are, so that's about right there. Now that bridge wants to pull itself down just a wee bit, so I might have to actually put a little bit of tape, electrician tape or something on it to hold it in position when I do the final intonation. But you can see that everything looks pretty good now. It's pretty much over the pole pieces and pretty much centered over the neck. So they've done a pretty good job of building this guitar. Sometimes you'll find that the necks aren't lined up, and especially the high E string will fall off the bottom of the fingerboard. But this one's actually pretty good. So I'm going to continue on tuning up, and then we're going to start adjusting the height of our strings and set up the neck a little bit, and then we're going to do an intonation. So I'll be back in a sec. Well, I've got the strings on, and I've got everything tuned up, and I've worked the Bigsby back and forth to make sure that my break angle, which is the way that the strings go from the Bigsby over the bridge, make it sure that it's enough to hold the bridge down properly and transfer the string vibration into the body, and it looks like it's fine. Before, it used to go under the bar, the roller bar at the front of the vibrato or the Bigsby, and the break angle was just a little bit too much, and the strings were actually binding on the back of the bridge. So now you can see I've got, I'd say about a 1/4 inch between the strings and both of the pickups, and I more likely have about 1/8 of an inch at the 12th fret between the strings and the frets, and this is just an approximate setup to start with. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to adjust our neck curvature and our neck relief, whatever you want to call it, and then we're going to start the process of actually intonating the guitar and then pinning the bridge to the top of the guitar. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to see if our bridge is relatively in the right place. And that's a pretty simple procedure, but you can see how I've set the saddles, that the low E string or the bass E string is pretty much right at the back of the travel of the bridge, and the high E string is about halfway through the travel. And the reason I do this is that I want to try to make the bridge be parallel to the pickup covers. It just looks good, looks better. It has no difference in sound or whatever, but I just kind of like that look. So we've got the bridge here in approximately the right position. We've got the pickups and the strings and everything in approximately the right position. So this is just kind of a place to start. So the first part of the process is we're going to try to intonate the high E and the low E. Okay, so this is going to be a bit tricky so that you can see, but I'll put this tuner up. And the way that we're going to do this is, first of all, make sure that your guitar is up to pitch. And let's hit the bass E string. And we see it's pretty much up to pitch. And let's do the high E, and it's pretty much up to pitch. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to set the bass side of the bridge. So where the thicker strings are, the bass E. And what we do is, first of all, pluck it open to make sure that it's pretty much closed. This one could use just a wee little bit. And then let's touch it on the 12th fret. And we see that that's actually pretty good. So we should be getting an E that's not high or sharp at the open position and at the 12th fret. So that looks like it's pretty good. Now let's go down to the high E and we'll do the same thing. High E looks like it's pretty close to pitch. Okay, then we'll go down to the 12th fret. And it looks like it's a little bit high. So what we're going to have to do at this point is we've got two options. One is we can actually bring the saddle back more towards the pickup, or we can angle the bridge. And like I said before, I like to have them kind of straight because I think they look a little bit better. I'm not sure there's any mechanical reason for doing this, but let's just take our E string back again, and remember we had our screws on this one towards the pickups. Now fortunately the pickups are low enough at this point so that we can get a screwdriver in there, and what I do is I usually put heat shrink on my screwdriver so that it doesn't mar either a plastic or a chrome or nickel cover. And what we want to do is we want to bring this pole piece quite a bit forward. Now, something you got to watch with these old guitars and even the offshore ones is sometimes either the screws through the saddles are rusted, or they're miscut, or sometimes they're so soft, so you got to make sure that you don't strip them out. And if you're having trouble moving it, then what you do is just put a little drop of that sewing machine oil in there, let it sit for a bit. Now I've got this as far forward as I can, and I'm going to try to hold this, the bass side of the bass E, hold this side of the bridge down, and I'm going to try to move this one just a wee little bit. Okay, and that's actually looking better because it's more parallel. Now I've got to bring this just a wee bit over the pull pieces, and again I might have to put a little bit of tape to hold that when we get to the final procedure. But okay, let's see how we're doing now. So we'll recheck our E to make sure that that hasn't moved, and that looks pretty good. In terms of the open tuning, and then let's go and do the 12th fret thing and see how it does again. Yeah, and that looks pretty good. Now let's take a look at the high E string, which still looks like it's pretty much in tune. And And for some reason, it's not, my tuner is not wanting to register it, so I'm going to go get one of my snark tuners and see if that's any different. Okay, now my snark seems to be registering, and same with the Diodario. I moved the Diodario to a different position on the neck, but what they're telling me is that I'm tuned up to E in the open position. Now if I go to the 12th, it says that I'm a little bit high. Now I put the snark in the same position that the Diodario is, and there must be some kind of null point in there, but it's not registering, so I'm still a little bit high. So what I'm going to do is again go through the procedure where I'm going to move the high E side of the bridge back just a wee little bit. Okay, so I'm a little bit high, so I've got to move the pole piece back a little bit, or the saddle piece back a little bit. See if we can get a little closer. Still a touch bit high, so I've got to move the pole piece back a little bit, and I'll move it on the screw in the bridge. So I'm going to move it back just a wee bit more again. There, we've got that real close now. So there we go. We'll check and make sure again. We'll do the bass E side just to make sure it's fine. Okay, so we're pretty close. So where are we at this point? The bridge is pretty much parallel with the pickup mount, which looks nice, and we've got the bass E pretty much to the back of the bridge, and we've got the high E pretty much at the midway travel point on the bridge. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that this is centered over the pole pieces again, because it wants to keep pushing itself down. And I'm going to do another check, and then I'm going to actually mark where the bridge is so I can put the bridge down. So I need something a touch bit more sticky for sticking that bridge down, and I've got to be a little careful with it because you don't want it to lift the finish. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some electrical tape, because when I mark the bridge I want the strings to be right over the pole pieces. So let's see if this will work. Now again, we've got to be a little careful because we don't want the finish to come off the guitar, but we'll see if that'll just give it enough, which it looks like it's doing. But now that I've played with the bridge a little bit, I just want to make sure that before I mark it, it actually is still in intonation. So let's try the bass E again. Yeah. So that's open. This is closed, which 12th fret, which looks a little bit high. Okay, just a touch bit, so I'm going to move it back just a hair. The base of the bridge back. Okay, try it again. Okay, there it's open and tuned, and 12th fret. Now we're a little bit low. Oh, there we're good. Okay, and E, the high E. Okay, and it looks like we're pretty good on both. So now it's time to mark the bridge, and then we're going to actually drill some holes in it. Now we have enough travel to be able to do a little bit of adjustment, except for the E. Now if I bring the E back into the center here, you're going to see that I'm going to have to, askew my bridge, so it's going to not be parallel. So let's make sure everything is square and that we're over the pole pieces and that everything looks good and everything's fine. Okay, now I'm going to mark the bridge, so I'm just going to take a pencil or a pen or whatever and mark on the masking tape. Okay, so mark on the masking tape. The masking tape can be a little hard to mark on, so we're going to try a different pen, see if that works a little bit better, and if not, okay. Now you don't want to press too hard because you don't want to go into the finish of the guitar. Okay, that's not marking very well, so it's pencil time. Just standard old HB pencil. Let's see if that works any better. A little bit better, yeah. Okay, so marking the bridge. going to carefully remove this and try to hold the bridge exactly where it is. And we want to mark the end because that'll indicate for us exactly where it should be to be centered over the strings. Now, next step is that we're going to be putting little black countersunk head screws. The ones I use are pickup ring screws, and we got one or two choices. We can either put them here and here, or where I like to put them is actually underneath the bridge so that you can't see them. So the next step we're going to do is put our block back underneath, and we're going to detune the guitar, and we're going to take off the top part of the bridge, and we're actually going to drill the holes. Now, before I do that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to mark the bass side of the bridge, because if you don't mark that and you get it wrong and your holes are slightly off, then your pull pieces on your guitar are going to be slightly off. So we'll just make sure that everything looks good here. Okay, we're all marked up. Now I'm going to get some screws. I'm going to drill the bridge, take it back off again, then put it back on again. So I've loosened off the strings a bit. Don't have to take them right off, just loosen them off and put my fingers underneath the bridge and then take it off. So then we can take off that part of it, and we've got it marked here, which is on the bass side of the bridge. So I've got the bridge piece, the actual bridge off the bass, and I've got the bass, or the heavier side of the bridge, marked with a piece of masking tape. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the positions of where I want my little screws. And like I said, you can either put them on the outside or you can put them on the inside of the bridge, where I prefer. So what I do is I just screw down the adjustment pieces, and I mark a little black dot in the center, just beyond these. And that's so in case we have to sand these down at some point or whatever, the bridge base, that I don't have to contend with the little screws. So we got that marked, and I've used a Sharpie for that because I got wax on here, so the Sharpie will actually mark. And the next thing we want to do is we want to get our little screws, and that's what I'm using. They're little screws that usually go in humbucker pickup rings. And what we want to do is, for the bridge itself, we want to, or the base of the bridge, we want to drill holes that are exactly the same size, just a touch bit looser. So let's try 3/32. This is a gauge, which is very useful. You can buy it at Home Depot or Harbor Freight or wherever. And what I want to do is I want to drill a hole that's just a little bit snug to that. So the 1/16 is too small. The 6/64 is about the right size. So I'm going to find a 6/64 drill bit, and I'm going to go out to, I've got a little drill press, and I'm just going to drill two holes, one right where that dot is, another one where that is. And I'm going to first of all drill a 6/64 hole right through the bridge, and then I'm going to go up a couple of sizes toward what the head size is, and that looks like it's about 5/32, maybe a little bit bigger. And I'm going to drill just sort of a little countersink hole, or I can use a countersink in the top of it so that the screw head, this part, actually fits inside or underneath the adjustment piece, flush with the top of the bridge. Okay, so here we are. I've drilled small holes through the base of the bridge, and I've used a countersunk so that the heads will, top of the head will be flush. Put in the little screws and just check, and that looks like it's pretty good countersunk. Same with that. You'll see that these are quite tight, but they just slide through a little bit. So and we got our base side measured, so we're going to put this on and tune it up again just to make sure that, and mark it one more time just to make sure everything's fine. Now you might see that the holes are not quite centered on the bridge, and this is sometimes happens even though I use a drill press, because the density of the wood can be a little different depending upon where the grain is. So this is the reason that I marked the base side, so that when I put it on and I actually drill the holes for it, that it will actually fit properly and not be askewed. So next step is we're going to assemble it and tune the guitar back up again. I've now reinstalled the bridge in the approximate position, and once again made sure that all the intonation was fine. The next step is we're actually going to drill and put the little screws in the top. So I always double measure and double try this before I do it, because once you've got it down, there's really nothing you can do except plug the holes and then try to do it again. But it's better to do it right the first time, and then you don't have any problems. So next step is going to be removing the bridge again, putting it in between the marks that we've marked, making sure the base side is where it is, and we're going to drill the holes. And what I'm going to do is use the drill bit gauge or screw gauge again, and drill a hole that's actually just a little bit snug for this humbucker screw, so that it fits nice and tight in the top, but it's not tight enough that it actually cracks the top. And again, I'm going to countersink the top so that the finish doesn't crack. Okay, now I've got the base of the bridge back on the guitar, and I'm making sure that it is exactly fits within the marks that I've made. Make sure that you've got the base side up. And then the next step is to actually drill the holes for the little screws, and you want to use a drill bit that's one size smaller than what the screws are. So one going through, and then we got the next one going through. Okay, and then next thing we want to do is countersink the holes so that paint doesn't crack. And the next step is to very, very carefully take off the masking tape, and especially be very careful around the holes that you've just drilled so it doesn't flake the paint. And you can see this is good masking tape, so it's coming off very easily and everything is fine. You can see now we have nice clean countersunk holes. We're going to put our bridge. So again, we put the bridge base back on with the base side up again, because sometimes the holes aren't exactly right. They're not centered. We don't want to get it on wrong, so let's get the first one started. Then we'll put the second one in. I haven't got it all the way down yet. And we'll tighten this one down a little bit more. Now we don't want to tighten it too much because we'll crack the base because we've got a countersink, but just enough so that it holds it nice and solid, and that the screw heads are in the screw heads are flush with the top of the wood. Okay, and again I'm using the technique on the screwdriver where I'm holding the bit so I don't slip. Okay, now that looks pretty good. Well, like I say, you don't want to tighten them down too much because you'll crack that bridge, but you can see that the base of the bridge is pretty much parallel with the pickup mount, which makes it look a little nicer. Okay, so then put back on our adjustment wheels. And again, the screws towards the pickups, and there we've got our bridge. So I've now put the bridge back on, and we're actually fairly parallel, pretty much exactly on parallel with the pickup, so it looks nice. I used humbucker pickup screws to put the base back on, and drilled a little hole through the bridge that was a little bit bigger than the pickup ring screw, and did a countersink on it, and then I drilled a hole just a wee bit smaller than the pickup ring screw through the top of the guitar after I'd located it on the masking tape marks where I had, and then tightened both of them down. I've got the bridge back on, and you know, we're looking pretty good. We're lined up with the pole pieces. We're fairly centralized on the neck. We're a little bit off, but we're directly over the pole pieces on the back pickup, and we're not too bad on the front. So we're in pretty good shape. I'm going to tune it up, and now we'll start the neck adjustment and intonation and pickup height adjustment. Well, I now have the bridge on, and as I said, it looks pretty well parallel to the back pickup. I've tuned it up, and I've adjusted the string height to where the bass string at the 12th fret, so the bass E string is about 2 millimeters off the bass string, and this is just a start for our setup. So next thing we want to do is we want to capo the guitar at the 1st fret, and double check it to make sure that we've actually got a clean note. And next thing we want to do is we want to fret the guitar on the high E string where at the fret where the body joins the fret on the fingerboard. So you can see here that we're at the 12, 13, 14, we're at the 15th fret on this guitar. And what we want to do is see that we can get a clean note. Okay, and that sounds pretty clean. Now, I know that some people use measuring gauges and whatever, but what it does is you don't need gauges to start with, and also it compensates for any kind of funniness in the neck if the fingerboard isn't quite flat. So if you can get a nice clean note, then that's a good starting point. Now what we want to do is we want to take a look at about the 7th fret, how far this first string is off the fret. And I like to adjust my necks pretty much straight. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that when I press down that maybe there's a distance between a sheet of paper, sheet of photocopier paper, 20 pound, between the bottom of the string and the top of the fret. Okay, so this one's maybe just a little bit more. I know it's pretty hard to see, but so then what we want to do is we want to actually adjust the neck, and we want to take a lot of the curvature out. As I said, I prefer my necks pretty much straight. So in this case, this is an offshore built guitar, more than likely built in China. I haven't checked it yet, but it'll have a metric metric nut on the end of it, so we want to use metric Allen keys, and this one happens to be a 5mm. So just want to first of all make sure that it fits, and sometimes you have to clean out, there'll be polishing compound and things like that in there, so you want to make sure that you fit this in properly. Now the next thing that I do is I give myself some room to adjust the nut without banging into the strings. So I'll often take my 2 center strings and I'll move them out and then put the capo back on again. Okay, so that gives me a little bit of room. Now with truss rods, there's basically 2 types. There's the one type of truss rod which only adjusts one way and usually will bend the fingerboard and neck slightly back. And I believe that's what this is, but we'll check and make sure. The other one is a dual motion truss rod, which actually will, depending upon which way you turn it, it'll either put a bigger bow, make the neck, fingerboard and neck more concave, or the other way it'll make it more convex. So what we want to first of all do is we want to figure out exactly what this truss rod is doing, and we want to make sure that it'll move, because occasionally on really old guitars you'll find that it's stuck or whatever, and then sometimes we have to, try to get that nut to loosen up just a wee bit. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the Allen key in, and I'm just going to go back and forth to make sure that it's loose. Okay, looks like it's loose, and it looks like this is only a one-way. So when I push it down, feels like it's loosening off the nut, which is allowing the neck to bow forwards like this. And when I go this way, it's making the neck bow the other way. So I've approximately got it in the position where it was, and it wasn't too bad, but I just want to check it and make sure that you know, we don't have too much relief in the neck, that it's not too concave. So let's try it again. Got a nice clean note. Let's tighten it up to the point of where it actually starts fretting out. Okay, it's still not. Okay, let's keep going a little bit more. Now this does look like a double action truss rod, because I'm actually increasing the space between the fret and the string. So let's go the other way a little bit and see how we do. And you can see, because we've moved the strings, we've got a nice amount of travel. So let's go this way and see what happens. No, I was wrong. It's not a double, it's a single action. So let's go back again. Okay, and we want to make sure that we don't tighten this up too much, because you don't want to break your truss rod or your neck. So let's just be very gentle on it. We'll bring it back to about where it was and see how we're doing. Okay, a little bit more. Okay, I can see now that we're starting to straighten the neck out. And I'm just, you can hear now we're starting to fret out. So again, I got my capo on at the first, and I'm fretting the high E string at the fret where that's just directly over where the neck meets the body. Now you can hear that this is starting to get a little bit buzzy, so let's just back that off about maybe a quarter of a turn, and let's try it again. And there we've got a nice clean note, and we've got very little space between the string and the fret at the 7th fret here, and it's about enough that we can put a piece of paper in there, like photocopy paper, and it'll just fit between. So that's kind of got our neck adjusted for the first iteration. So let's take this off, and we'll put our strings back in. Okay. And then tune it back up again. Okay, so we've got our guitar tune back up, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set the intonation, and we're going to go back to the procedure that we did on the first and 6th string when we're positioning the bridge. So what we're going to do is we're going to, let's see where I can get the best angle there, that might work. Okay, so first of all, we're going to start with our bass E string closest to the top of the guitar. I'm going to make sure that it's tuned up to pitch, which it is, and we're going to fret it at the 12th fret. And you can see that we're pretty much on. Okay. Okay, now let's go down to the A string again, A string, which we've never intonated, and let's see how close we are on that one. We may have to move the screws back and forth a little bit. So make sure it's up to tune, which it is, and then we fret it at the 12th fret, and we find we're pretty much bang on. Now, I staggered the pole pieces before I put the bridge on, because with experience you kind of know sort of where they are, where they should be, and it looks like we're pretty close on the guess. Okay, let's try the D. So the D looks like it's a touch bit high, so we're going to use our screwdriver and we're going to bring the bridge saddle piece towards the pickup. We'll give it a couple of turns, and sorry, I should mean I'm going to back off the saddle, so I'm moving it away from the back pickup, and we're going to see how we do. So let's tune it up again. There, we're right tuned on to D. It stayed pretty good, and we're going to try it again. And we're still just a touch bit high. Okay, just a very little bit high. So again, we're going to move that saddle back. And now we're absolutely bang on. So the rest of the procedure is just simply to go to each one of the strings and do as I've shown, and adjust the saddles either back and forth till you get the note with the open string and fret it at the 12th fret exactly the same. And that's basically the intonation process. Then the advantage to that is as you play up and down the neck, the guitar will actually stay in tune, because you notice often when a guitar is not set up and you start playing it as you get down the neck, and especially playing chords, you'll find that nothing's really in tune. So I'm going to turn off the video and continue intonating the other strings, and we'll come back and do a little bit more after we're done that. Okay, so we're tuned back up again. We've got the intonation set by adjusting the saddles, and bridge looks straight right over the pole pieces, so everything so far looks really good. It's turning out well. I've set the the string height by using these adjustment screws, and I've set it possibly a little bit higher than what some of you people that do a lot of shredding or speed playing. So I'm again about 2 millimeters. I measure that at the 12th fret, and I can measure both the bass and and the treble side, but I'm essentially at about 2 millimeters from the top of the fret to the bottom of the string. Why I set them a little higher is that when you bend you don't fret out as much, and for me it's a little easier playing up the neck, that when you're bending your strings they don't pop out from your fingers. Now, kind of where I learned this actually was from professional players. You'd be amazed at how high some of their strings are, and this is essentially the reason that I do it. Now, I can't give you an exact number for the height right here. What you have to do is now play the guitar and fret each string in each position and make sure that you can get clean notes all the way up the fingerboard. Now, if you can do that, then you're set kind of right, but if you find that you're fretting out certain places, you may have to increase the curvature of the neck a little bit, loosen off the truss rod nut. Now, we're doing a primary setup on day one, but usually before I give a guitar back to a client, I will let it sit for at least 24 hours and go through all this again, because you'll find that when you reset the truss rod and do a few things to the intonation and that, the guitar has to settle in a wee bit. So especially with these arch tops, you might find that the top of the arch here may come in a little bit, so we may have to raise the strings, and again we just use the wheels on the side. But other than that, everything looks pretty darn good. The only criticism I have at this point is that the distance between the pickups, and particularly the back pickup, and the pole pieces and the strings may be a little bit, there might be a little bit too much distance, and it looks fairly good on the treble side, but on the bass side it looks a little bit high. And I have the bridge pretty much set so that it's equidistant from the strings on the bass and both on the treble side. So at this point what we might have to do is we might have to put some shims under the pickups, but I'm going to play it a little bit, and we're going to see if it sounds good. We're going to play it without an amplifier to start with. So let's see what I can get for a video here. I'm going to move my camera around. Okay, so I've tuned it up and everything's fine. So I'm going to just strum some open chords. And everything sounds pretty good, not getting any rattles. And you notice as I'm going up the neck, it's staying in tune. And I'm not getting any aberration caused by the magnetic field of the pickups. Now most two pickup guitars, there's usually not a problem with it, but with Strats, and I'm going to show you that when I do a Strat, is often there's something called stratitis, so as you're playing up here, especially chords, it will actually go out of tune. But for right now what we're going to do is you just go each string right up to as high as you can reach, and you want to make sure that you get clean notes. open. There we've got just a wee little bit of fret buzz. There a little bit. That one's good. So our high E seems to be pretty good too. Now I think the problem that we have with the G string in here, there might be a bit of a high fret in here, or something's happened. Often on acoustic guitars or arch tops like this, you'll get a little bit of an issue around here because of the thickness of the wood and being joined to the body and things maybe not drying out. But so you can hear it pretty good. If we want to get rid of that little bit of fret buzz up in here on the G, there's a couple things we can do. One is we can raise that side of the bridge a wee bit, turn the wheel up a little bit. Or the other thing we can do is we can do a bit of a fret dress and repolishing, which I'm going to do a completely different video. But considering that we had some wear on this, I'm very, very pleased with it. Hear that it plays in tune, so our intonation is good, our action is good. So far so good, quite happy with this. Now, next thing that I'm going to be doing is we've cleaned up the guitar, we've got the bridge on it. I'm going to polish up the guitar, and I'm going to do that for a couple of reasons. The major one is that if you put polish on the guitar, it has a tendency of resisting the scratches more, because there's a very thin coat of wax over it. Now, I use waxes that do not have silicone in, which I recommended, because if you ever ding a finish, let's say you want to fix that little ding, which I don't know if you can see, if you put a silicone wax on, or wax with silicone, you can't get the finish to stick. And also I find that silicone waxes look good when they first go on, silicone base, but as they get a little older they get cloudy and funny, and the only way that you can actually remove them is with naphtha. I've had a few Strats that people have used, I don't know what brand, but of polish, but it looked great when it went on, and after a few months, when they brought it back to me, it was all dull, and I tried to, you know, buff it up and do everything I could, and I finally had to end up stripping the whole guitar with naphtha. So maybe just a quick show of, I'll put this back, and quick show of some of the stuff I use. I like Gibson polish and Martin polish. They've been around forever. There's no or very little silicone in these, so I don't get paid by Gibson or by Martin for recommending their polishes, but I think they do a good job. So the basic that we're going to do is we're just going to spray the polish on the guitar and evenly spread it. You don't need that much. We're going to let it dry for a wee little bit, and then we're going to rub it down with a clean cloth so that it doesn't look streaky. So the way that I do it is I start by Just doing a few squirts on the guitar, and try not to, squirt it underneath the Bigsby and stuff like that, because then you have a hard time cleaning it up afterwards. But we got enough there. Then I take a small piece of rag. And this one's been well used. It's got a lot of polish on already. So we'll just spread it on real nice and even here. Now I do front, back, sides. Also I do the back of the neck. I don't do the fingerboard because you'll find that these good waxes have a bit of a cleaner in them, and we put paste carnauba, the varathane wax, on the fingerboard, and it will actually start removing it, which we don't want. And I'll sometimes actually put a little bit on the pickup covers because it provides a little bit of a film over it, so as you're picking, your pick won't wear as badly into your pickup covers. And if you get a little bit of this on your strings, it's not a big deal because it's such a light coat. In fact, there have been cases when people do, or clients do, a lot of sweating that I'll actually just go like this and put a light coat on it, and it helps the strings from corroding. But just first of all, want to get it all over as best we can, as even as we can. Now at this point it looks, doesn't look very nice. It looks kind of streaky and smudgy and whatever, but as we'll let it dry for a little bit, and then we'll actually start buffing it out, and you'll see that it looks very, very nice. Just to remind you again on this Bigsby that I've actually strung the strings over this roller retainer bar because I thought the break angle was too sharp, and the strings could actually bind on the back of the bridge, the back part here, or they don't slide smoothly through the saddles. Okay, and I mean you can put this on absolutely everything. I don't like to spray it on, I like to rub it on so that I can control where it goes. Okay, so now I have another rag which is fairly well used, it's a little bit drier, and we'll start buffing it up a little bit. And you can see it's starting to look a little bit better already. While I'm doing this, maybe we can talk a little bit about Epiphone guitars. I've worked on an awful lot of them, and the earlier ones weren't as good as the latter ones. I've got a couple of 2020s. I've got a Firebird and a TV Yellow Special with P90s. And both of those are absolutely excellent guitars, especially given the money. They sound good, they play well. The quality control is a lot better. Pickups are closer to the real thing. They've finally gotten over winding all the pickups so that they now don't sound like mud. You can actually use them for anything other than heavy distortion. Based upon the two that I own, I would recommend them. You know, again, you have to be careful in picking them. And I'm going to do a whole video on actually showing you how to select a guitar, how to make sure that it's a good guitar when you buy it. Now I'm going to continue just polishing this up, do the back and sides, and then we're going to do a few more odds and ends. I'm going to show you one of the most useful devices that I've found, which I use for absolutely everything, and what it is a chopstick from takeout Chinese food. And how I use it is for getting into places where, you know, it's hard to get, like underneath the tremolo or underneath the Bigsby here. We want to make sure that we get a little bit of wax underneath there, but we also want to make sure it's cleaned up, so the chopstick won't mar the finish on your guitar. So, you know, it's very useful, and every time you do takeaway Chinese, you get a new set, so once they get grotty, you just check them out. Looking good. Okay, the guitar is all polished now and looks quite nice. Now I'm going to show you another little trick that I learned that has saved me a lot of aggravation, and hope you'll find it useful too. As I was saying, a lot of the screws on these offshore guitars are not very good, and you can strip the heads out, you can do all sorts of things with them, and they actually go rusty very easily. But one of the problems that I've had is removing screws and stripping off the heads or breaking the screw in the guitar, and then you've got a real headache repairing it and getting the old screw out. So one of the things that I do is I like to put wax on the screws before I put them in. Like this is, you've seen this before, this is the Varathane finishing wax that I use, and all I do is I just dip the screw in it just a wee little bit. So I don't know if you can see, but I've got a bit of wax on that. And then I simply insert it in the hole and tighten it down a little bit. And from before, we've actually countersunk the hole so that it's so that the paint won't strip out on it. Okay. And I've got one more screw here that I put away on this little thing, and that's the one that goes on the side. So we'll put a little bit of wax on that and put it in. You'll find with the wax on them that they go in an awful lot easier, and they'll also come out a lot easier. Now with pick guards, I don't like to tighten them up too much, because especially with ones like on this guitar, they have a tendency of cracking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten this front one up just enough until it won't move. We don't want it to rattle or do anything like that, so I think you saw there was a little bit of tubing underneath it, so this seems to be pretty good. We can adjust that around these pickups to make sure it's not rattling on it. Now, one of the other things that I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of oil on these screws here to kind of loosen up the rust. If I had more time, I'd go into my bin of screws and I would replace them all, but as I say, I have to have this done for Mick within a few hours, and I just don't have time to do some of the smaller things. Now, we've still got a bit of work left to do, so I'm going to start by showing you that the pickups, as I said before, are a little bit higher than what I'd like. The neck pickup is pretty good, but the back pickup is pretty high. And under normal circumstances, I put gaskets underneath it, and there's several things you can do for gaskets. You can buy them, you can make them, whatever, but I think I'm just going to leave this the way that it is, and if Mick wants it to be a little bit more punchy on the back end, then at a later date I'll put some gaskets underneath it. But what I'm going to do is just bring these pull piece screws out just a touch bit more, and again, I don't want them too far out. I want the bottoms pretty much even with the top of the pickup cover. So let's try this. I can bring them out maybe another turn or two. Okay, that's about as good as we can get them without shimming them. So come up a little bit more. This front one, and when I look at the pole heights, I'll hold the strings down at the base of the neck, and both pickups are just a wee bit high, but the pull pieces are a little bit low to the strings, but we'll just leave it where it is for a bit. I can see when I look at these, they're not quite level, so I'm going to bring them up just a wee bit. And what this does is makes the pickup more sensitive to the string. Basically brings the magnetic field closer. It's getting a little bit better. These neck ones now are pretty close to the bottom of the head, being even with the top of the pickup cover. I don't like to get them any higher than that. But, okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to try to tune up the Bigsby tailpiece Bigsby a wee bit so that it returns back into pitch when we use it. Now, a Bigsby really, it's not a Kahler or a Floyd Rose, so it's kind of used more for the wobbly type of very slight pitch bending. So the first thing we're going to do is we've got it strung up now. We're going to try and see how it actually works. See if it'll come back to pitch. Actually, it's not too bad. There's one thing that I don't like, and it's that the tremolo arm is a little bit loose. Now, in order to tighten that back up again, what we have to do is we have to actually loosen all the strings, take them off at the back here, and then flip the tremolo over, or the vibrato arm over, and tighten that up. So again, because of time, I'm not going to do it, but it seems like it's returning to pitch fairly good. Now before, when it was going under this bar, it was having a lot harder time returning to pitch because of the break angle. And it seems to be quite good now, but there's a few things that I can do to make it even better than what it is. Now that we've got everything sort of set up, we're going to work a little bit on the Bigsby to get it to work a little bit better. And one of the problems I find with a lot of guitars, especially cheaper ones, is that the nut hasn't been cut properly. And the strings actually bind in the nut. And a lot of people figure that, well, if my guitar doesn't hold tune or goes out of tune, or I can't use a Bigsby, then it's got to be the tuning pegs or machine heads. And actually that's not the case. Machine heads have to be really, really bad for them not to function. So what I've got here is I've got a set of nut files, and these are Japanese ones, which are really quite good. I got them from a local supplier. And what we're going to do is we're just going to make sure that, first of all, the angle that the slots in the nut are cut at are right, and also that they're the right size. Especially if you go up in size, like on Fenders, I'll use a 52 gauge string on the top, and the nuts are cut for 46. So, but on something like this, it looks like it's pretty good, but what I want to do is I want to make sure that I angle the slot back at the same angle approximately that what the string is back to the machine head. So what I'm doing is going to go actually downhill, down towards the neck, and then I'm going to polish that fret out. So first thing I do is I just remove this. Now you can see I put a chunk of a piece of paper from the strings underneath the strings here, so I can't mar the head. And then I simply just go down at the same angle approximately that the strings are. Now you don't want to get this too deep, because if you get it too deep, then when you're playing open strings, it's going to buzz on your first fret. But you can see that sometimes I'll elongate these a little bit. This is a 46 string, and because I'm using, this is going to be for on used with a Bigsby tailpiece, I'm actually cutting it at about 54 and very lightly, so it's got some room to move. So I put this back in here, and now the trick is that we don't want to cut it too low, because we still want this string in an open position not to fret out on here. And I can't give you the exact distance between, because it really varies with each guitar neck and each set of frets and how you play and all sorts of things. But okay, so what I've done is I've got the 6th string, and I usually start at the 6th and then I go to the 5th. And again, I don't want to take these down very much because they're actually pretty good. Now, if you happen to take them down too much, I can show you a procedure in another video of how you can actually use crazy glue. I guess it's cyanide type base glues that you can use for building it back up again. So just doing this just a wee bit. Okay. Now I'm going to continue and do the rest of them. I'm going to turn the camera off. You don't want to see that, but I'll continue on. Okay, so now we've got all of our fret slots, or all of our nut slots, cleaned out and angled back down at about the same angle that the string goes back down to the machine heads. So essentially what we have is the string only making a contact point really at the very front of the nut. Now the next little thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to polish those slots out, and there's a couple of ways of doing it. One is that you can actually buy abrasive yarn in various sizes and gauges, and you can use that. Now I don't have any of it, and I want to just show you a simpler way of doing it. So what I've got here is just a piece of nylon cord. It's fairly thin, and it's actually used for fishing nets, so it's pretty darn strong. And this is a product called Novus, and this is number 2 fine, which is used for polishing aircraft windows. So it's meant to polish different types of plastics. So all I'm going to do is just put a wee little bit in the slot. There we go. And then all I do is I take my piece of string and I run it in the slot. Just run it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And what that's doing is it's polishing the slot. And I think there's a little wax in this too, so it may leave a little bit of wax in there. Now the other way of doing it is, I told you to save your old strings. And what you can do with your old strings is basically the same thing. Put a drop of the compound in here, and then just use your string and go back and forth like this. And you can feel that as you do that, it gets slipperier and slipperier, so there'll be no binding. So we got a real nice looking slot. Now I'm going to continue on doing this now that you've seen what I'm doing, and I'll do it off camera and then I'll come back. Now when you get down to the smaller ones, you can either use a smaller string or you can use the string itself, but the procedure is basically the same. Just polish it out. Okay, I've now got all the slots polished out and a wee bit of the guitar grease put in it, and any excess, clean it off, because it's just going to smear around a little bit. But I've got it tuned back up, and you can hear now that it's getting pretty close to coming back to pitch. And I'm depressing quite a bit on the Bigsby arm. So next thing we're going to do is do the same thing, but we're going to do it to the slots in the bridge saddles. So again, I'm going to use my piece of string and use the Novus number 2, and we're going to polish out the grooves in the saddles just a wee bit. So now I'm going to do basically the same procedure I did to the nut to the saddles on the bridge. And got our same piece of string, and it's good string, so we can use it an awful lot. And put a little bit of the Novus on and put it in the slot. And I usually go down towards the back, but you polish this out. And clean it up. And we'll put a little bit of graphite grease in that one, just a wee little bit. Not too much, just enough to cover it a wee bit. And take the excess out, because if you leave too much in, it actually will affect how your string operates. It won't vibrate properly, but there's enough graphite in there now. Put that back up on top. Now the procedure is again to do all of them. So we've got one here, and everything looks well with that. Yeah, they're sounding better all the time. So I'm going to turn off the camera and do the rest of the saddles, and then we'll try it and see how it works. So I've got all the slots polished out in both the nut and in the bridge, and we're going to give it a test play. I've got it back up to tune again. So you can hear it's coming back into tune, and it's actually really good. Checking it with my tuner, and I'm bang on for every string again, so that's been successful. Now fortunately, the bridge on this one doesn't rattle. Maybe in another video I'll show you how to fix a rattling bridge, but right now I'm pretty pleased with this, except for the pickup heist. But being that I'm running out of time before Mick has to come over and pick it up, we'll leave that for maybe another time if he wants it. It sounds like our intonation is in quite well. Bridge is pinned, and our vibrato is working. I haven't plugged the guitar in yet. If we have time, we'll do that. If not, I'm just going to have to take it the way it is, but I know that it'll work a lot better than when it came in. Returning back to pitch. Successful job. Now before I hook this thing up to an amplifier, there's a few things I want to do. The output jacks on these guitars, almost all guitars, are always loose, so use a nut driver and tighten it up nice and tight. And the other thing, I know you can't see down there, but if you look down there, it looks like you could farm potatoes in it. So I'm going to clean that up a little bit, and there's two things that I do. One is I have a gun barrel cleaning I guess you call it brush that I bought at Walmart, and this one happens to be, I think, 22 or 25 gauge. They're real cheap, and I'm just going to run it down inside to get a lot of the gunk off. So just rotate it and go kind of back and forth. So that looks a lot cleaner now. And the second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take some contact cleaner and put it on a Q-tip and go down in there and clean it up. So and what I'm using for contact cleaner is I'm using MG Chemicals, and this is electronic contact cleaner with silicone. So put a little bit on your Q-tip and then just run it down in. And you'll see that the Q-tip is actually dirty from all the crud down in there, the corrosion, so just keep running it around till it gets clean and shiny on the inside, and then we're ready to plug the guitar in and try it. Okay, so we're pretty much finished working on this on the guitar, and it's quite a handsome one. So everything worked out fairly well. The only two things that I do not like at this point is that the Bigsby arm should be tightened up, and also some shims should be put underneath the pickups. But I'm not sure that I got time to do that today, so we're going to plug it in and just see how it sounds. Okay, so now we've got it plugged into an amplifier. Things seem to be fairly good. The jack was still a little bit dirty, but balance between the pickups is off because the back one should have a shim. That's a center position. This is neck. You'll see Bigsby works. So if I've got time, I'm going to see if I can do something about shimming that back pickup. And also I may take the strings back off and then tighten up the arm on the Bigsby. But other than that, it's working fairly well. Well, I had a wee bit of time and I actually put some shims underneath the pickup so they look quite a bit better. You can see they're now maybe, I don't know, maybe about 3 millimeters from the base E string. And I buy these on the internet, and I buy them in sets, and basically what they are is they're pieces of either hard plastic or fiberboard, and they just fit underneath the pickup, like what you see here. So the back one I've had to lift up quite a bit, front one not so much, but I'm trying to get them to balance a little bit better. So I'm fairly happy. The only issue I've got right now is that if I've got time, I'm going to take the strings back off and I'm going to tighten up the vibrato or the Bigsby arm. You can see that when I push it down, it actually flexes at the joint, and it's not supposed to. It's supposed to be relatively stable. So if I get some time, I'll do that, and if not, I guess we just have to wait until next time. Well, I have a little bit of time, so I'm going to actually tighten up the arm on the Bigsby. And what I've done is I've actually loosened off the strings and taken the ball ends off, which are sitting there. And you can see what there is if you take the arm back, you can see that there's 2 nuts on there and there's a spring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all line both nuts, and then I'm going to tighten the 2 nuts to the point of where when I put the arm back on the spring and press it down, it doesn't flex anymore, that it's more solid. So I've now tightened up the 2 nuts, and I have them aligned so that when I put them back on the spring and I press down on the Bigsby arm, that you can see it doesn't flex in the joint between the arm and the carriage of the Bigsby. And not only that, that tightens that up a little bit, so you can it doesn't flop around like what it used to. So now the next step is I'm going to actually offset the nuts. So the top nut, I'm going to turn it a little bit so it's off center, because the way these work is that it actually one nut tightens on the other one. So I'm going to do that, and then we're going to string it back up again, see how it works.